Hi, my name is Bente, I'm the Norse Witch, and today I have a little bit of a tricky topic for you, and that is the gods and their gender. That is a topic that is sometimes heavily discussed on TikTok especially, I would say, and especially when it comes to Loki, of course, but I've also seen Odin and Thor mentioned in that discussion. There's always kind of two sides to the discussion. One side thinks that especially Loki is genderqueer and that they/them pronouns should be used for Loki. But sometimes even Thor and Odin are seen as queer because of different reasons. So yeah, this is the one side, and the other side usually says things like the pronouns that are used in the Eddas and the Sagas should be kept, and Loki and Odin and Thor are definitely male, and he/him pronouns should be used, and this whole discussion shouldn't even arise because what is said in the Eddas and Sagas is fact, and that's it. And I kind of fall not even in between these viewpoints, but even outside of them completely. So I thought in this video I would give you my personal viewpoint on this whole topic, because I think it's actually a fun topic to talk about and to think about. So let's get into it. So, as I already said, there are always two sides in this discussion. One side seems to think that Loki, because Loki oftentimes shapeshifts and sometimes even shapeshifts into a woman or in a female horse and then bears children as a woman or as a horse, that is the reason why Loki is or should be seen as non-binary or gender fluid. Definitely some kind of queer, and with that also comes the opinion that they/them pronouns should be used for Loki. And sometimes this opinion is even spread out to Odin and Thor, because Odin practiced a kind of magic, seidr, that was seen as very unmanly. It was kind of a woman's kind of magic, and people who would practice, or like male people who would practice seidr, would be seen as ergi, which basically means it's very, very unmanly. That, for some people, seems to be the reason why Odin should also be seen as genderqueer. And then lastly, Thor. Of course, Thor also dressed up as a woman, as Freya especially, at some point to get his hammer Mjolnir back. Some people see it as kind of cross-dressing, or as him also being kind of gender fluid. And that's also the reason why these three deities are kind of seen as some kind of queer. And the argument for using different pronouns for some gods, but especially Loki, Odin and Thor, is usually that from our modern viewpoint, our modern standpoint, these entities would be probably seen as queer. While back during the Viking Age, of course, that was not the case, because while they knew people who would express gender differently than just 100% male or 100% female, it was very much looked down upon. And of course, they didn't have they/them pronouns. They just didn't use something like this. So of course, the gods would not be seen as gender fluid or queer, and of course, they wouldn't use they/them pronouns or any kinds of other pronouns than she, her, and he/him for their gods, because they just didn't have the words, and those gender identities were looked down upon. So that is kind of the first viewpoint in this discussion. The other viewpoint is more conservative, and that is that the gods have a gender. In the Eddas and Sagas, it's either he/him or she/her, and it should stay that way. Usually the arguments against updating the pronouns is that, for example, when it comes to Thor dressing up as a woman, that was just because he had to. He had to dress up as Freya to get Mjolnir back, and because he just had to, he did it, so that doesn't really make him queer. With Loki, it's usually the same reason. He does it out of necessity. For example, when he shapeshifted into a female horse and wore Sleipnir, he did it because he had to keep the Jotun from finishing the wall. He had to distract his male horse, so Loki had to shapeshift into a female horse to distract the horse. The gods only shapeshift into women and other kinds of beings because they have to and not because they like it and they enjoy it and that is part of their gender identity. Of course, on this side of the discussion, there are always also, unfortunately, people who are homophobic or transphobic, or they just dislike the LGBTQIA+ community for some reason, so they don't want to see that kind of transferred onto their religion and their gods. But I will keep that out of the discussion for now because of course that is fucked up and that is wrong. There is no discussion about that. So yeah, now that I have kind of outlined the two sides in the discussion that I usually see, I want to give you my personal opinion on it. As a non-binary queer person, I should maybe say that because sometimes one side of the discussion always says it's only queer people, especially non-binary and trans and gender fluid people, who try to kind of apply they them pronouns for Loki or say that Loki is non-binary or gender fluid. They just do it because they want to be represented in the religion. I have seen that argument that it's only queer people who do that. That's bullshit and also shouldn't have anything to do in the discussion in the first place. I thought maybe I should mention that I am queer and non-binary myself, so you would maybe assume that I would use they them pronouns and think that Loki is gender fluid or non-binary, but I actually kind of fall out of both of these opinions. My opinion is kind of very different on this topic because I feel like we shouldn't try to apply our gender on the gods in the first place. Of course, we have to use some kind of pronouns for them because how else do we want to talk about them? In my opinion, that doesn't really matter that much because in the end, they are deities. They are spirits. They are not from our world. If we have something like a gender construct, which is a human construct, why would we try to kind of apply this construct that we made ourselves onto other spiritual beings who aren't even from our world? I don't really get that. For me personally, that doesn't really make sense. As much as some people like to imagine them being human and imagine them as looking like humans, as I said, they're spiritual beings. They're not from our realm. They're not from Midgard. Yeah, that is why to me personally, that doesn't really make a lot of sense. I also don't see this discussion about other kinds of spirits. For example, with land spirits, I never see anyone running around like, oh, this land spirit is non-binary and this land spirit is male and this land spirit is female. I've never seen that, so why do we apply that on the gods and goddesses? I don't know. I feel like the only spirit where it would make sense is our ancestors, because they were once humans, so as a human they had a gender, so it would make sense to still apply that gender when they have already passed on and have become an ancestral spirit. If an ancestral spirit of mine identified as non-binary and used they them pronouns, of course I will still do that when they have passed on and have become an ancestral spirit. But the gods and the goddesses were never human. It's just us humans who started calling them by some kind of pronouns because that is how our language works. Just because our language works that way and us humans work that way and we kind of like to put everything in boxes, I don't believe that these boxes that we have created for humans apply to the gods. A lot of you probably may harshly disagree with that. I personally feel like none of these viewpoints are wrong, apart from if you think that, for example, Loki is not queer simply because you are queer-phobic. That's a different discussion. As long as none of these viewpoints arise from that, they're all not wrong. I just feel like we can never know. Feel free to leave your opinion on this topic in the comments, but please be nice to each other, because just because we disagree on a topic, that doesn't mean we have to be rude to each other. So be nice to each other. You are very welcome to start a discussion, but just in a very nice and polite way. And of course, if anyone wants to leave homophobic, transphobic comments under this video, then you will be blocked. So just don't dare. Before we end this video though, of course, as always, there is a patron shout out to be done. So let's do that. Thank you very, very much for supporting me. Christopher, Glacier, Gael, Nat, the Court Jester, Fabienne, Tammy Me, Bresky, Jella, JB, Tim, Anna Qboard, Laura, Kristen, John, Ivy, Phoenix, Anton, Noemi, Jenny, Tyler, Els, Betty, Maggie, Misty, Tiffany, Amy, Colette, Tell, Timothy, Coffee, the Honorary Gossip Squirrel, Bjorn, and Ash. As always, I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to subscribe and give a thumbs up. And of course, check out my other social medias. I am basically annoying you everywhere, so check that out. I also run an online shop for sustainably and ethically sourced witchcraft and paganism tools, so you can also check out that. And if you maybe want to support my channel, then check out my Patreon. And I will see you in the next video. Bye!